being led into the Beijing courtroom, charged with taking the lives of 6 people aged between 18 and 84, Yang Rui Xi looked over towards the public gallery. Facing him were the furious family members of his victims who lost their relatives during a 2-hour violent spree on the outskirts of the capital city. Staring at the people gathered without a hint of remorse in his face, the relatives began screaming and shouting at Yang Rui Xi, who was not only once their neighbor, but also, in one case, a member of the family. After the lead judge calmed the situation before anyone attempted to attack Yang Rui Xi, the prosecution began questioning the defendant. While there was no doubt about his guilt, this was an opportunity for Yang Rui Xi to plead his case and offer extenuating circumstances that could see him escape the death penalty. However, it quickly became apparent that Yang Rui Xi believed his actions were fully justified and felt zero guilt for ending the lives of 6 people. When asked how he felt now about what he'd done on August 17, 2012, Yang Rui Xi replied that he didn't think anything about it, just that he'd brought balance to his life. He followed up by saying his victims deserved it for years of bullying he'd endured, leading him to hate them all, and added that if he was going to hell, he wanted to take as many people as he could with him. At around 7 in the morning of August 17, 2012, Yang Rui Xi set off from his home located in the Pinggu district of Beijing, 73 kilometers to the northeast of the city center, on his motorbike. Before setting out on the journey, he placed 3 knives into his bike's top box, along with a written list of names, people whose lives he intended to end. The names belonged to individuals Yang Rui Xi decided to exact revenge against for wronging him in various ways years prior, and whom he blamed for ruining his life. Riding out from Nandulehe village, his first destination was 3 kilometers north, to the neighboring village of Beidulehe, where the home of his first target, a man named Xueqiang, was located. Arriving at the home, Yang Rui Xi climbed the property's courtyard wall to avoid being spotted by witnesses, and entered the building. In small village communities such as this, everybody tended to know each other, meaning there was a strong sense of trust, and residents didn't concern themselves too much with the security of their homes, so Yang Rui Xi found the doors unlocked. Entering the home, he was confronted by the man's 19-year-old daughter, referred to with the pseudonym Xiaoxue, who once considered Yang Rui Xi an uncle. At the same time as Yang Rui Xi set out on his intended trail of destruction, Xueqiang and his wife had left the home to go to work, leaving his daughter and her 18-year-old best friend, identified with the pseudonym Liu Min, at home. University student Xiaoxue was back home for the summer holiday, having just completed her freshman year, and was celebrating Liu Min gaining admittance into university after finishing high school. Seeing Yang Rui Xi in her home and recognizing him, Xiaoxue asked what he was doing there, to which he demanded to know where her father was. Xiaoxue told the intruder her father was at work, and being familiar with his past, demanded Yang Rui Xi leave the home immediately. In response, Yang Rui Xi attacked the young woman with his knife, inflicting multiple injuries to the chest and abdomen of Xiaoxue. Seeing her friend being violently attacked, Liu Min attempted to intervene to save Xiaoxue, but received several injuries from the knife of Yang Rui Xi as a result. Xiaoxue fell to the floor bleeding heavily, but the wounded Liu Min managed to force her way past Yang Rui Xi and out into the streets, screaming for help. Attracted by the commotion, villagers came out of their own homes to discover the source. Some attempted to offer first aid to the young woman and contacted the emergency services, while others armed themselves with whatever they could find and ran to the crime scene to confront Yang Rui Xi. However, the moment Liu Min ran outside, Yang Rui Xi left the home the same way he entered and was already gone. The villagers did what they could to attend to the injured students, but tragically, they would both pass away before ambulances arrived. Yang Rui Xi had gotten back on the motorbike and was making his way to the next target on his list, 20 kilometers to the northwest, in the village of Dayuzi. Dayuzi was the place Yang Rui Xi was born and raised, but it held few happy memories for him. Despite this, he believed other residents had ultimately forced him to leave the village, and he resented them for that. His target was Liu Kai, the former head of the village committee, and the man Yang Rui Xi blamed for getting him jailed for 10 months, which resulted in his first wife leaving him. When Yang Rui Xi arrived in Dayuzi, Liu Kai was watching other villagers playing cards outside a convenience store, so he stayed close to the target's home and waited. Yang Rui Xi followed Liu Kai into the courtyard of the man's property. Once he finally returned home, unarmed with knives in both hands, he attacked, mortally wounding the former village chief, the victim's grandson witnessing the assault. Hearing shouts coming from the home, other villagers began rushing to the scene, but Yang Rui Xi, once again, was already riding his motorbike to the next target. The next stop on his journey was only a short ride away, at the village supermarket run by 49-year-old Zhang Jia and his family. Entering the supermarket while Zhang Jia and his 84-year-old father, identified with the pseudonym Zhang Moyi, sat in their living quarters of the business. Bursting into the room, Yang Rui Xi immediately attacked the man with his knife, inflicting multiple injuries to the chest, abdomen and back of Zhang Jia. The elderly and frail Zhang Moyi had little time to react or do anything before Yang Rui Xi also attacked him in much the same way. Hearing shouts for help, the 26-year-old wife of Zhang Jia, identified with the pseudonym Wang Mojia, entered the room and tried to stop Yang Rui Xi attacking her husband and father-in-law. However, she too would find herself being seriously injured by the knife of Yang Rui Xi. Not wasting any time, Yang Rui Xi left the scene and got back onto his motorcycle, intending to move on to the next name on his list. Despite being severely hurt, Wang Mojia was able to call the emergency services for help and raise the alarm to neighboring villagers. Tragically, she, her husband and father-in-law would succumb to their injuries before the paramedics and police arrived. When police got to the village, residents were able to identify Yang Rui Xi as the person responsible for the fatal attacks, and informed officers he left the village on a motorcycle heading south. Officers established checkpoints on major roads around the district, and 40 minutes after attacking Zhang Jia and his family, Yang Rui Xi was arrested 10 kilometers from the final crime scene. Being taken to the local police station, Yang Rui Xi made no attempt to deny he was the person responsible for taking the lives of 6 people. On the contrary, he proudly boasted about his actions. He also informed officers he'd intended to end the lives of 3 other people in the 2 days prior, but ultimately had to abort his missions. The investigation team got plenty of background information about Yang Rui Xi from both the residents of the areas the lethal attacks took place and the man himself, who was only too happy to tell police his life story, which he believed justified his actions. Born 1966 and native to the village of Dayuzi, he was the youngest of 5 children born to his farmer parents, having 2 older sisters and 2 older brothers. Yang Rui Xi claimed his father was an incredibly strict disciplinarian who regularly beat his children with canes to keep them under control. Yang Rui Xi recalled an occasion when his father tied him to a wooden beam in the family home to render the 14-year-old defenseless during a beating. He'd long learned crying or begging for it to stop only caused his father to beat him harder, so he stayed as silent as possible while he endured the pain. The fear of angering his parents caused Yang Rui Xi to retreat into himself, and he became extremely introverted, rarely talking with his relatives. His time in school wasn't much better. Being of small stature and somewhat underdeveloped for his age, he became an easy target for bullies. The bullying manifested in verbal abuse, which Yang Rui Xi remained silent about, but the one occasion he actually talked back to one of the tormentors, he received a few punches to the face. Returning home, his father noticed the marks to his youngest son's face and asked the boy what happened. When Yang Rui Xi told him the truth, rather than getting support, he was beaten again by his father for being weak and a disappointment to the family. The beating caused Yang Rui Xi to run away from home, hiding in a cave in the countryside surrounding his village. His siblings attempted to find him, but failed in their efforts, so after 2 days away, Yang Rui Xi returned on his own accord, but his father never bothered to ask where he'd been. During his middle school days, he developed feelings for one of his female classmates, and eventually mustered up the courage to tell her. However, when the girl's family found out about what he confessed to her, it once again resulted with Yang Rui Xi receiving a beating, this time from members of the girl's family, who told him to stay away from her. The incident saw him now struggling to contain his anger, but rather than speaking out about it, he would go to his bedroom in the family home and begin violently smashing anything he could. At the age of 22, it seemed Yang Rui Xi finally found some happiness in life when he married another villager, Yang Meiling, which gave him the chance to finally leave his family home. He found work as a laborer on local construction sites and eventually saved enough money to open a small grocery store in the village. While other people in his hometown didn't have a high opinion of Yang Rui Xi, finding his introverted personality and frequent angry outbursts off-putting, his wife saw an extremely different side to him. She described him as honest, hard-working and warm-hearted, but shortly after opening the grocery store together, an incident with another villager saw his darker side emerge. One evening in 1993, Yang Rui Xi entered his home in an extremely furious mood with marks on his face. Yang Meiling asked her husband what happened, but he just said someone slapped him, and proceeded to violently smash various items in the living room. With the husband refusing to tell her who hit him, Yang Meiling got the information thanks to other villagers gossiping about the incident. The shop they opened was directly opposite the supermarket run by Zhang Jia and his family, but despite having competing businesses, it seemed the two families were friendly and happy to help each other out. Zhang Jia reportedly lent some money to Yang Rui Xi, who wanted to buy cigarettes and alcohol wholesale for the store, but Yang Rui Xi didn't seem in a rush to pay back the loan. The debt was 200 yuan, around $28, and when Zhang Jia asked for the money, Yang Rui Xi reacted angrily, leading to Zhang Jia slapping him in the face. In the days following the incident, Yang Rui Xi remained in a bad mood, losing his temper over the slightest inconvenience and smashing stuff around the home. He believed Zhang Jia had embarrassed him in front of the village, and everyone was laughing at him behind his back. The grudge he held against Zhang Jia festered inside Yang Rui Xi for nearly 20 years, until he entered the man's supermarket on August 17, 2012 and brutally ended the lives of Zhang Jia, Zhang Moyi, and Wang Mojia. A few years into their marriage, Yang Rui Xi and Yang Meiling had a child together, and life continued fairly normally, until an incident in the year 2000. Still running the grocery store together, business was going well, with Yang Meiling largely managing the store, while Yang Rui Xi dealt with other aspects of the business. One element of that was going out to wholesalers purchasing fresh stock for the store, leaving his wife alone, which led to rumors going around the village. A regular customer to the store was village chief Liu Kai, but gossip began to circulate around the small community that he spent an unusual amount of time at the shop while Yang Rui Xi was away. Villagers believed, or at least spread the rumor, that Liu Kai and Yang Meiling were having an affair, and it wasn't long before this got back to the wife of Liu Kai. The two women got into a confrontation about the rumors, with the wife of Liu Kai reportedly slapping Yang Meiling, and when Yang Rui Xi heard about the incident, he decided to defend his wife's honor. However, not wanting to be embarrassed in front of the village again, this time, he armed himself with a knife and went looking for the village chief. Despite carrying the weapon to confront Liu Kai, Yang Rui Xi ultimately found himself on the losing side of a beating once more, being forced to retreat by the village chief, but did at least cause a minor injury to Liu Kai. Liu Kai informed the police about the incident and the wound he received from the knife during the confrontation, which resulted with Yang Rui Xi being jailed for 10 months. While Yang Rui Xi was incarcerated, Yang Meiling struggled to cope raising their child and running the store, so eventually sold the business to someone else in the village. She also chose to divorce Yang Rui Xi shortly after his release, as his violent temper tantrums were becoming more frequent and increasingly aggressive, leaving her scared he'd harm her or their child. Feeling humiliated once more, and with his life falling apart, Yang Rui Xi decided to leave the village he'd spent his entire life thus far, and wouldn't return until 2012, where he'd take out years of resentment he felt towards Liu Kai, brutally ending his life. He moved 20 kilometers to the south in the more urbanized area of the Pinggu district, working initially on construction sites, before becoming an unregistered motorbike taxi. In 2006, he met Xue Jing, who resided in Beidulehe village, and the pair entered into an intimate relationship. Xue Jing was 49 at the time they met, making her almost 10 years older than Yang Rui Xi, and was recently separated from her husband after she caught him having an affair. Although the couple never got an official marriage certificate, they considered each other husband and wife, even holding a wedding banquet to celebrate after Xue Jing moved into the home Yang Rui Xi had purchased. As with his first wife, Xue Jing viewed Yang Rui Xi as an honest, hard-working man, and the rest of her family, including her younger brother Xue Qiang, felt the same. However, the short fuse of Yang Rui Xi soon emerged, but this time his furious temper tantrums were much more aggressive and concerning. While previously he took his anger out on inanimate objects, now Yang Rui Xi began verbally threatening and hitting his new wife. A frequent source of his anger was the family finances. He would note how much money the couple earned per day, then demand Xue Jing give him a list of each item she'd purchased the day after, and the cost. If the amount she spent went even slightly over the amount he gave her, Yang Rui Xi exploded into a fit of anger. The abuse became too much for Xue Jing to endure, but any mention of leaving him caused Yang Rui Xi to hold a knife to her throat, with him telling her if she walked out, he'd end her life and the lives of her family. In 2009, while Yang Rui Xi was away working, she finally decided to take the risk and leave, moving into a small cheap apartment in Pinggu district, and opening a street food stall. However, it didn't take long for Yang Rui Xi to track her down and angrily demand she come back to him. Other stall owners on the street would step in to defend Xue Jing and force Yang Rui Xi to walk away, but in 2010 the situation worsened when Yang Rui Xi came to the stall armed with a knife. This time Yang Rui Xi refused to leave the area without her, so Xue Jing called her younger brother, Xue Qiang, for help. By the time the brother arrived, the police had already gotten involved and were trying to get Yang Rui Xi to walk away. Xue Qiang, however, still confronted Yang Rui Xi, shoving the man twice and warning him to leave his sister alone. In the mind of Yang Rui Xi, the shoves he received in front of other people were no different than the slap to the face he got from Zhang Jia and losing the fight with Liu Kai years earlier, and it was something he wouldn't forget. Yang Rui Xi seemingly spent the following 2 years completely alone, struggling to get by. His first wife Yang Meiding didn't allow him to see his child, scared of what he might do to the both of them. He had little contact with his own family, his siblings seemingly having cut off contact with him, and his parents passing away. With little education and the criminal record, he was only able to work low-paying menial jobs, which often didn't last long thanks to his general personality and hair-trigger temper. He was a middle-aged man with no money, no family, no friends and no prospects for the future. Memories from the past festered in his mind, causing him to believe his miserable life was solely down to the people he felt bullied and humiliated him over the years. In 2012, feeling his life no longer had any meaning, he wrote a list of names, all the people he felt negatively impacted his life, and decided to get his revenge. On the 15th and 16th of August 2012, he went looking for 3 of the names on his list, intending to end their lives. However, for reasons Yang Rui Xi failed to later explain, nothing happened, and he refused to tell police what the targets did to cause him to want revenge against them. The failure seemingly made him more determined to get revenge on the people he hated most, taking 3 knives to make sure he had one for each target, worried if he only took 1 knife and it broke during an attack he wouldn't get satisfaction. He planned his route, first heading to the closest location, Beidulhe, looking to get revenge on his ex-wife's younger brother for the public shoves received 2 years prior. When he found Xue Qiang wasn't home, he didn't hesitate to attack the 19-year-old Xiao Xue, who he once considered his niece, and after fatally wounding the student, her best friend Liu Min just became collateral damage. He then returned to his hometown for the man he perhaps blamed more than anyone else for his current predicament in life, Liu Kai, brutally ending the man's life in front of the victim's grandson. After ending the lives of Zhang Jia, Zhang Moyi and Wang Moujia, he then went to another home in the village, intending to attack one more man, Yang Delin, whom Yang Rui Xi claimed had given eyewitness testimony against him after the fight with Liu Kai. However, it appeared he had a change of heart when arriving at the man's home after seeing a woman enter the property before him. He told officers he changed his mind as he knew the woman and she'd never caused him any problems, so not wanting to harm an innocent person he rode away. This made little sense to the investigation team, as both Xiao Xue and Liu Min never did anything to harm Yang Rui Xi, but the claim would play a significant role in his later sentencing. The lawyers tasked with defending Yang Rui Xi attempted to argue their client clearly suffered from undiagnosed mental health issues which undoubtedly contributed to his actions, and brought in a psychologist to identify the problem. The results came back that Yang Rui Xi suffered from paranoid personality disorder, displaying most characteristics of someone with the condition. Symptoms include but aren't limited to doubting the trustworthiness of others, being unforgiving and holding grudges, hypersensitivity to criticism, believing their character is being attacked, and being hostile and argumentative. This led his defense team to later argue in court that he couldn't be held fully responsible for his actions, and therefore couldn't be considered eligible to receive the death penalty. In his court appearance on July 15, 2013, after the family members of the victims were calmed by the judge, Yang Rui Xi gave rather curt but firm replies to the prosecutor's questions. The only time he spoke in detail was when taking the court through the attacks on each victim, and the past issues he had with the various families. In the case of his first victims, the 2 students, he claimed the attacks were their fault for not having the door to the home locked, and for confronting him, suggesting if they just ignored him they'd still be alive. Throughout his questioning, the lead prosecutor posed several questions which appeared pointless, such as asking Yang Rui Xi if he could recall the clothes Liu Kai wore on the day of his spree, and if he was wearing a hat. However, this was to preemptively counter the defense's claims Yang Rui Xi acted with diminished responsibility due to the paranoid personality disorder diagnosis. They were attempting to show that Yang Rui Xi didn't commit his crimes in an uncontrollable rage, but was clear-headed and calculated at the time, carefully picking his targets. By having Yang Rui Xi recall minor, seemingly insignificant details from the day, the prosecution later argued it showed he was aware of what he was doing. Yang Rui Xi answered every question put to him with what in his mind were honest answers, refusing to accept any fault for anything that led to him taking the lives of 6 people. When asked about the past feud he had with Zhang Jia, he denied ever owing the supermarket owner money, and claimed the man hit his first wife Yang Meiling, something that wasn't supported by anyone else, including Yang Meiling herself. He also argued Liu Kai used his influential position to get him sent to jail for intentional injury, after Yang Rui Xi attacked him with the knife, saying the injury to Liu Kai was unintentional, only minor, and nothing to take so seriously. The final point the prosecution made was regarding Yang Rui Xi choosing not to attack Yang Delin. They claimed the fact Yang Rui Xi decided against attacking him showed that he was in control of his actions, and therefore could be held fully responsible for his crimes, despite the mental health diagnosis. Family members of the victims were permitted to give impact statements about how the incident had affected them personally, to which Yang Rui Xi continually sighed and rolled his eyes as the people spoke. When tired of hearing the family members speak, he began interrupting, making sure to let the relatives know what terrible people most of his victims were and how they deserved what happened to them. His argumentative interruptions became so frequent, the lead judge ordered him to let the people speak or he be forced to remove Yang Rui Xi from the courtroom. Towards the end of the proceedings, the court asked Yang Rui Xi if there was any history of mental health issues in his family. Yang Rui Xi replied saying one of his brothers suffered with dementia, but was quick to add the illness didn't cause him to end anyone's life. Just prior to the court adjourning to discuss the sentencing, the lead judge asked Yang Rui Xi if he had any further statement he'd like to make, to which the defendant replied with a curt no. On July 15, 2013, Yang Rui Xi was sentenced to death for 6 counts of intentional homicide. After the announcement of the sentence, his defense team would attempt to appeal the punishment on his behalf, still arguing his mental health diagnosis meant he shouldn't be eligible for the death penalty, but Yang Rui Xi refused to allow them to do so. Once the window of time which allowed his lawyers to appeal closed, the judge's decision was reviewed and the sentence upheld. On December 13, 2015, Yang Rui Xi was executed by lethal injection, never having apologized to the victims' families, still fervently believing what he did was entirely justified. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, leaving a comment, and subscribing to the channel. And hope to see you again for the next dark tale from the Middle Kingdom.